Welcome to the Let's Talk About podcast. And today I'm really excited to be talking to Dr. Karen Coe. And she's a PhD psychologist, neuroscience practitioner, and serial entrepreneur who has scaled, sold, and reinvented businesses across North America. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you, John.
Awesome to speak to you because you've done a lot. And I know from your track record, what really sets you apart is the fact that you went through a life-altering accident. And at one point, you're even labeled not employable. You then applied neuroscience to build your cognition, your career, and your life from scratch. And now you can proudly claim that you're the CEO of Coe and Company, creator of Brain Pro training and building MindQuest Brain Advantage game, which is an AI-powered platform designed to train the brain and the decision maker behind it. So that's a lot to unpack right there.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
So let's jump into it, actually. So given that background and where you're coming from, because you've built an executive search firm from scratch, scaled it internationally, and then made that deliberate decision to walk away, talk me through your decision process and tie all this amazing history you've got together.
Well, thank you. I think that just to start, I'll make a sentence. I didn't walk away from success. I walked toward a problem I could no longer ignore.
Okay, interesting.
And I'll tell you a story about that, because so often our stories are so much a part of the fabric of the turns we take and where our maps go. Basically, I had over 2 decades in executive search, absolutely loved it. And I reached a point where I paused and decided that I needed to take a view, seek my client's view as I build a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. So I went out to interview a broad level of client. And what I heard changed everything. Just to give you an illustration, when I interviewed clients, they would lean in and say, rather than answer the questions of what new talent they saw on the landscape or whether we're going to need the new hires, they said, can I speak to you about what's happening for me in my career and happening in the business? Confidentially. And I sat back, honored, but also surprised, because you'll consistently hear that no one was giving me information on the new talent hire, an executive search assignment, a merger that was going to happen in 2 years, and I needed to be ready to do certain things. Instead, they leaned in and opened up on what was happening in their business and their careers. Just 3 story examples. One was a vice president of innovation and technology at a major energy company, considered highly innovative in his career, well recognized as a leader in the company, and so by all external standards, extremely successful. And he said to me, my world is so full of busyness, corporate agendas, the things that I need to manage on the metrics on a day-to-day basis. I don't think I've had an innovative thought in 6 months. I don't have the space to innovate. And innovation is my passion. That's where I get my energy. I don't feel engaged, and I certainly don't think I'm going to be the best mentor. You talk to everybody. You know what the others are doing out there. Tell me what they're doing. I need to do something different. This wasn't an exception. I went on, talked to others. Another sector, a vice president of technology and telecom. Went to talk to him. I got can I talk to you about what's happening in the business and what's happening for me? You're a psychologist. You talk to everybody. You can tell me what to do. And I leaned forward, and it was, I am so busy keeping up with marketing changes, competitive metrics, preparing for what looks like a looming merger, and I'm supposed to be onboarding highly talented people to mentor them, that I'm irritable, I'm frustrated, I make reactive decisions, and I'm not advancing the business. And what's worse, when I leave work, I am so irritable and angry when I get home, I could be headed to another divorce. You tell me what I need to do to change, because I can't keep this up. And the last one perhaps touched me most personally, a vice president of a power company. Absolute dynamo. She said the same thing, but her wording was different. She said, when I'm at work, I'm playing whack-a-mole. What I do is I hit this problem and solve it, another one. And I think I've solved it and I've solved these problems. And that's what I'm trying to do. But when I come back to work, the same ones have emerged in different clothes. And I do the same thing again. I'm like a gerbil on a wheel. But the worst part is when I get home at night, I don't get home and arrive mentally for 2 hours. I physically arrive, but I'm not engaged. And I'm costing my family about 2 hours of that engagement time every day.
Wow.
You talk to people. I'm supposed to be at my best in this game. I don't know what other people are doing. And I sat back quite shocked because they had the smartwatches. They had the physical trainers. They had the gyms, the trainers, the clubs, all the executive perks and executive coaches. And that wasn't solving the problem. They needed something very different. They needed a way to think, decide, and engage and operate at a different level. And one they considered superior performance, not the one that was being judged by the outside. So I went to these meetings to get a strategic plan for an executive search firm, and I got a mission. And the mission was, what is it? So I set about for 2 to 3 years doing research, talking to companies and technology, because it was considered the decade of the brain, all these new emerging solutions. And I was really excited because at the end of the 3 years, yes, we had training solutions and tools and workshops we could bring. And I was on the cusp of launching a technology solution service for corporations and executives that I would be able to bring to Calgary as a hub of innovation. I was a month away from signing the deal. And then life happened. I had a very significant accident, so significant that it literally resulted in multiple spine surgeries, pain, rehabilitation, physical therapy. I needed those neuroscience tools. And trust me, I couldn't even walk away from the executive search business. But I got something much bigger in return, much deeper. Because instead of sitting back and looking at neuroscience tools that other people needed from the outside, now I had to use them from the inside and build out. The same tools that others said they needed, I needed to use to rebuild cognitive focus, perceptions, opportunities, flexibility, resilience, see new opportunities and rebuild. So when I came to that awareness, that became the new mission, not to add it as an adjunct to executive search, but to now bring the full solution to the very leaders who had given me the mission and find a way to help operationalize it for them.
So that was that one problem that you were working towards, is that
Yes.
how do you solve that for these high performing people and ultimately be more productive, but also get back their time. So then I love the phrase you mentioned around it was costing my family 2 hours a night.
Yes.
So get back that time and be present and add value to everyone around you, not just the work.
Yeah, because they looked present. The body was there. But she said, I'm not present. And it took 2 hours to get there. Others really enjoyed mentoring. They love their teams. They work with the people they were there, but they realized they weren't at their game. And they considered that mentoring essential to them. They were disappointing people. This was not as human doings, but as human beings. And that really resonated with me because they didn't need to tell me that, but they sensed this disconnect between what was performance as usual and what they knew their capacity was, and they knew they weren't at capacity. And they did not know how to get that breakthrough. They didn't know how to move beyond. And as leaders, they all recognize they set the pace for their mentors. They set the pace for the team. They set the pace around them. And you and I know in the top league, attracting and retaining top talent is critical. And the environment they create is an attraction tool.
Yes. Yeah. And firstly, you just want to make sure, I mean, you went through that terrible accident. Hopefully you're recovered or recovering and all back on towards the mend.
Yes. The key thing I think that is invaluable about the recovery is I've never been in a position where I needed rehabilitation. to ask for help, to be vulnerable, to not have the answer when someone says it takes time. So while I was creating and studying the neuroscience now from the inside out, I looked at how you could use those tools in rehabilitation. And that's what led to me co-creating the clinics for action psychology in Toronto and Ottawa. If I could use those skills and train people who had had life-changing accidents, robberies, been shot at, dramatic events for people that are in first responders, those same tools at an even higher level could be used for high performers who are looking for just that next step of breakthrough. And I've demonstrated it works.
So let's unpack that breakthrough moment, because you mentioned how senior leaders and executives, VPs are struggling this, but I'm actually, and you too, are probably seeing this at all levels, not just the senior levels. It's this constant DMs, emails, messages, and doing my own research into this as well. I as I understand it, it's a physical condition because your amygdala is working on that fight or flight mode to react, and your shallow breathing, faster heart rate, more cortisol. So when I was thinking, okay, how do I become more productive? I know I'm not being my operating at my peak. I looked at time blocking, and when I got to those hours of the time block, I felt it really difficult to switch from the fight or flight DMs to, okay, now I'm going to focus and I'm going to really deep dive on this. And I was really struggling to switch the context. And what I understand is, and maybe you can help us understand this more, is it's a physical change in your body that needs to happen to get out of that fight or flight and into the rest and digest. So it's not just a strategy problem, it's also a mindset and psychology and physiology problem as well.
Very well put, including your observation. So let me make a statement I think is really important. It's rarely a strategy problem. It is disguised as a strategy problem, but it is a mindset problem. And in neuroscience language, mindset means the software. We have the hard running system of the neurological components, but we have the software. And the software requires rewiring. And that is very much what you described as part of the physical change process. So let me give you 2 or 3 of the key parts of that operating system. And you need all 3 parts, or it's like connecting the dots. Something doesn't measure up. So the first thing is there's this system, and I tend to use short language, but I'll spell it out so everyone can look it up. It's the Reticular Activating System. And that system is your filter. So that system has a set point because it's used to what you consider to be a threat, survival, or breakthrough. And most of us in the Reticular Activating System have a filter operating, almost like setting a thermostat in the room, say 72 or 18C, whatever we prefer to use. And in that scenario, the Reticular Activating System operates at the level that you've trained it to operate at. So when there are new data points, if it perceives it's a threat, you might not even see them because its default is to block it out, to protect you and make you comfortable. The second part of the system is the heart-mind connection. Lots of people have heard about deep breathing, which is a tremendous skill to use. But a company called HeartMath came up with revolutionary research for which they were nominated for a Nobel Prize. That it wasn't the breathing, it was the coherence between the neural networks between the heart, which has more nerves operating than the brain, and the brain. Simply put, they could demonstrate that if you were thinking thoughts which caused some concern or anxiety, that your heart rate would also in jag or in synchrony follow that. But the moment that you put into your heart thoughts and emotions and visions that were positive, that your brain patterns changed completely. So unless you are experiencing that physiologically, literally breathing through your heart, your brain is not going to leave fight and flight. It's going to stay there. And then the third thing you talked about, which is so accurate, John, is the amygdala. And
Mm.
amygdala is where you get that fear response. Watch out, look for it. Did I miss something? And most people don't know that until you downtrain the amygdala, until you downtrain that response, that you're going to remain in that stage. Because remember, your brain was not designed for your success. Your brain was designed to protect you and keep you safe.
Yes. And efficiency, to preserve energy.
Efficiency. So the moment we say to the brain, well, I want you to unlearn a skill. I want you to, somewhat like if you went to play tennis or pickleball. No, this isn't from the wrist, it's from the arm. And you've been used to doing it a certain way. It demands a high metabolic formula from the body, because you have to start putting a lot more energy to learn the new skill and unlearn a habitual behavior. And what's the brain built on? Habits and patterns. Yes. It runs patterns like a great corporate athlete. I know what to do here. I put my finger on that, and that I'm going to run that pattern. Except what happens is when you get fast, you got this fabulous microprocessor of all the decisions and information getting in place, it gets faster and it gets more rigid because it builds a myelin sheath to keep you doing exactly what you're doing. And patterns are everything.
Yes. Yeah, the brain is, from what I've read as well, the brain is very good at creating efficient ways of doing things to conserve energy. To your point, it's protecting you.
Correct.
And conserving energy to do things in the most efficient way, which is why habits are so strong. And like you said, the myelin sheath across the neuro pathways are hardwiring your brain into how to do things. So then when you want to switch to the innovation or strategic thinking, you're having to tap into different neuro pathways, which is like you say, a context switch, which takes effort.
It takes effort. There are ways to break through.
Yes, love to hear about this.
There are ways to break through. So one of them that we just talked about is that you and I have both enjoyed is travel, going to different places. Going to different places, so being in new environments, learning new skills, learning a new skill in something different, doing things completely unrelated to your career, and engaging with things that are challenging nuances or curiosity. That's just one skill. The seek and find new things. And the reason is every time your brain has to seek and find something new, neurons fire together. And when neurons fire together, they wire together. When they wire together, we call that neuroplasticity. So you want to build plasticity. You want to surprise the brain, give it new challenges, and let that wiring continue. And that wiring creates flexibility. You don't want to be rigid, you want to be flexible. And the executive who builds neuroplasticity and flexibility can outmaneuver any rigid CEO that cannot move with that kind of adaptation. So the first is building that. The second one is that size matters. Why do we say that? Well, because every time you wire those neurons together, a process we call neurogenesis, basically creating new, you're building neural capital. Now, John, you consult CFOs and CEOs and you look at the fiscal balance sheet and do audits of those resources. And that's critical to every company. But there's another screen. And that other screen is, what is your neural landscape? What is your neural capital? And that is size. And when you do the new tasks and do that, you build the plasticity and you build size. And that neural network is an advantage. Capital advantage. And what we tend to do is spend our time on the hardwired capital, but the most important capital a CEO has for he or she and their team is their neural capital. And that is underinvested because what I've done well, I keep doing.
Yes.
So then I get stuck because what we do is we end up in a paradox. I call it the golden cage. Because the very thing that made you successful, you repeatedly do. Solve the problem, solution, mentor, do the same strategic plans, attend those meetings, and that is part of what has made you successful. And now what we're saying is, well, wait a second, we want you to be innovative, have breakthrough thoughts, advance the corporation, but that's territory you don't know. You've never been there. And what's requiring from you is a sense of certainty when you feel uncertain. Well, here's the paradox. When you want certainty and comfort, that's your brain trying to keep you comfortable. No,
Yes.
regret. You could fail at that. So the golden cage is to stay where you are. But the reality in neuroscience is the brain follows action. Action creates certainty. You cannot think your way out of a problem with the
No.
same neural network that created it. But if you act forward and you change that behavior, your reticular activating system says, wait a second, we're looking through a new lens, and we'll start to send you the resources, the capital, the neural wiring, and look at your environment differently to bring you those resources. So once you act, the map will change for how to succeed, go forward, because you have changed the coordinates by acting. So it's paradoxical.
So just let's unpack that, because going back to the new experiences, you mentioned vacations, travel. So what I'm hearing is that vacations aren't just a break. They are an opportunity to learn new things. And as I found on my recent vacation, I was thinking more clearly about my business and my clients. So from a neurological point of view, what you're describing is my brain is freeing itself up to
Yes.
think in a different way. And then that builds capacity to think more, the plasticity and the capacity to think more like that.
Yes.
So you can then bring that back to your job, work, client,
Yes.
to then encourage more of that thinking if you continue to give yourself opportunities to do that.
And if you absolutely, and if you see that as a mind workout, mindset workout, it's mindset work, which is the soft work. Very important. Now, I like to say, when people say, well, what are the tools I should bring to start to help myself know, should I do this one or should I do this one? Because it can be overwhelming. And I have a kind of a mnemonic I use called HEART.
Okay.
And the first one is H, humility. And part of that is you don't need to have all the answers as you go forward. You have to have that curiosity and willingness to learn. So being the student and the learner. And just as I was, I'd never had to ask for help. I didn't know how to do these exercises. I didn't know how to think my way forward, especially under adverse circumstances, because I hadn't experienced them. Now I needed to use it. The second is empathy. And I put with empathy for E, emotional intelligence. Developing those skills to be able to develop that relating. Because if you're going to take these skills and transfer them into behaviors, you want to be able to have others follow those, and you can relate to where they started. The next one is adaptability. And that adaptability is really essential, because adaptability is part of that reticular activating system, that neuroplasticity. And when the brain sees that you put yourself into challenges, even mini challenges, the brain says, we can do this. I'll do it again. And why is that important? Because the brain does not know the difference between what is real and what is not. People are, the expression, fake it till you make it. They've actually shown in science with musicians, just as one illustration of the evidence, that a violinist playing a violin will have certain performance centers activate in their brain. And they've given that same violin to someone who doesn't play the violin, and they play it, and guess what? Same centers in the brain activate. So your adaptability to practice the skill, even if you haven't got it, is already generating neurogenesis and getting those cells. It's a little like when you go to the gym, you don't see those muscles or flexibility appear.
Six-pack abs.
Yeah, the six-pack. They don't appear instantly. But if you do the work, they're appearing. No, I haven't seen it yet. So that's the patience of that, okay? And then the next part, which is really important, is in the R, is the importance of resiliency. And resiliency is the ability to coordinate that head and heart by putting yourself into situations that do elicit some of the threat. And you can manage the levels of that, but give yourself those exposures to build that resiliency. So when you're put into the clutch situation, you're able to sit back and build on some of those neural reserves, okay? And the last one is T, trust. You need to trust that your system, which was created to serve you, and that you're sharing this skill building with other people is transparent. It is not about being the best. It is about being the best version of you, building that capacity and flexibility to use your unique strengths. There is no one perfect standard to move to. All of it is growth, and all of it results in action. So using that HARP model, people sit by and say, well, there's pieces of that I can start with, and where I can start from that and build. So I could start from the humility, taking some classes. I could start from something as simple as finding a new way home at night. Most of us, you put the car in road and you get there and you don't notice anything because it's road. Finding a new path, finding a new way to get there forces your brain to look at the environment and scan for new data, and gets you out of autopilot. Now, when people say to me, well, I just thought I just needed to put my foot in the gas and push my way through it. So I'd like to give you the analogy. The answer is no. That is not what you do. Okay. If you think about renting a car, and you're young when you rent a car and you think, oh, this is a hot car, and you race that car and you keep maximizing the RPMs, keep pushing it right through. Okay. If you keep doing that to your body to push it to that point, at some point you're using up your neurochemicals. You have a system that is very intrinsically balanced to give you those chemicals. And when you exhaust them through burnout, through mental and physical exhaustion, you use up your supply of dopamine, serotonin, and other chemicals that are designed to give you that energy and that mental resilience. But if you learn instead, it's not about the speed, it's about the journey, and you learn to shift. Take the time out as you did in travel. Go into an environment that is new sounds, new music, new rhythms. Your brain observes that for you, and the brain will slide into flow. You didn't need to go to a training course to do that. You put yourself in the environment to do that.
Yes.
Now, you also, when we talked about that being available to learn and adapt, often people say, well, who should I follow? Who's doing it right? Just tell me how they're doing it and I'll follow them. Well, the reality is that when we start to look at our lives, we look at relationships, and relationships are about co-engagement. What does that mean? Well, that means the people you work with are really important. The people you train with are really important. The people you follow, they're all around your resources are important. They're far more important than what an executive search we used to call, and others call, networking. Because co-regulation means that one of the things you can do is look for the people who have an energy mentally, physically, and emotionally that you find attractive and empowering.
Yes.
And when you spend time with those people, remember we talked about that fixed thermostat, the handcuffs that keep you in the angel care and prevent you from moving? Well, they're operating at a success thermostat that's different than yours. And the brain is attracted to that. And the brain has patterns and will start to mirror that energy. So one of the ways of doing that is not just in the environment that we have outside us, but the environment of the people we're in relationship with. And therefore, you need to pick your tribe really carefully.
Yes.
And therefore, as an executive, you're the leader of that tribe. Who do you mirror? Who brings you that energy? Who helps you shift to that next level? Who do you admire for that breakthrough? Associating with them and co-regulating facilitates, just as if you're with someone who's regulating at a very, let's call it amygdala down regulation, that's negative for the team because they'll pick it up the moment you walk in the room. But conversely, they'll pick up the other energy and move to that other level. So that's essential in looking at the team of the leader, and as well as what the leader can do on his or her own.
I love this. There's so much firing in my brain around what you're saying. And my immediate thoughts go back to the break that we just took in Panama, traveling through Panama country to Costa Rica. And as I mentioned in the pre-show chat, how my wife broke her foot on day one. And what fired for me just then is because my initial reaction on day one of my wife breaking her foot was, should we consider going back home early? Should we just reschedule the rest of our trip?
Mm-hmm.
Credit to my wife. She was like, no, we're here. We're going to make the most of this and do it. What I'm reflecting back on how I reacted in that moment is I was still probably a little bit, well, probably a lot in that fight or flight mode, coming off of a busy week, just landed in a new country. I hadn't fully decompressed and, to your point, gone through those heart framework changes yet. So I was still in the, let's just take action. It's not necessarily the right action, but we just need to take action. Let's change our plans immediately.
Let's escape.
Yes, let's escape. And I'm so glad that we decided to continue, because the trip was still wonderful. We still made the most of it. Yes, we had to adjust. And to your point around the R of the heart analogy, the resiliency, we went through this change, and now I know we can deal with anything that comes up on a trip like that because we've been through that experience.
Well, and you also did something else. Instead of letting the circumstances, the external locus of control, we've got this trip, we've got this money, we're in this, these are our circumstances. You shifted to an internal locus of control and consulted her around what experience do we want to have? What's important to us being here together? The time, the event, etc. And the research shows never give away your locus of control. And you didn't do that. You kept the internal locus of control. And the research shows that people that keep that focus on the internal control, their state of their internal environment, outperform those that don't, and they also grow their executive function.
Right.
And in that process of doing exactly what you did, you strengthened your neural pathways, you increased your resilience, you enhanced your relationship in terms of you did it together in that decision process, right?
Yeah.
And as a result of that, you came out. And the word is that if you can master that internal locus of control, you can master any room you walk into.
Yes. And I love your A of the heart as well, the adaptability, and specifically the you mentioned about the violin player, because early in my career, working at some of the big four, worked for Deloitte and Ernst & Young, and it was a very hard-working career. It was very much about the grind, the push, and it was all about winning or getting to the result. And I love the point you make around even just practicing the skill still fires the same reaction as achieving the skill.
Correct.
So even going through it is winning because you're still practicing those same activities that you can apply to anything.
And by internalizing that, I've been practicing. You've preset the brain so that when you act, the behavior follows. And then the map opens up. To give you an analogy or an actual life example of a sports psychologist that I think highly of, in training elite tennis players, she will not let them go into training until they have done their heart rate coherence work. Because she recognizes and knows the science that when those are in co-regulation and coherence, and the individual can visualize themselves achieving the feeling of success, the environment, the pleasure they have with the play, etc. When they enter the game, their brain state has already changed. Because you cannot solve a problem in the brain state that created it. But if you change state and physically change that state, you've opened the door.
Yes. Yeah. So not everyone listening to this will say, I've got time to go on a 2-week vacation or training. So I've often thought and been asked, how do I do this in the minute or 2 or 5 minutes between meetings? Or I've got to quickly reset because I want to change, but I don't know how. And I'm curious what quick frameworks you've seen to use if we only have those few minutes. And I'll lead with one that I've started to use recently that I heard about, which is the 3 M's for music, mindset, and movement. So if you only had a couple of minutes between a meeting, is listening to some music just to switch your brain into something that energizes you, something that you like. the movement as in physically getting up and walking around, ideally looking at something in the distance, walking up some stairs, or even just standing up and walking on the spot for a second. And then the third M is mindset, is visualizing how you want the next meeting or the next activity to go. What's that process? What's that success? What's that outcome? So by doing the music, mindset, and movement, you're at least setting yourself up for a better outcome than you would do if you just go straight into it. But I'm curious what you've seen work well in if you just have those few minutes.
One of the things that you said, I always put at the top of the list, movement. But I don't mean movement like going up a flight of stairs. I'm talking movement that is a dramatic state of change. And the good news is we have technology. We have earbuds, headphones, etc. So you can put on in 2-3 minutes your most favorite go-to success song. I don't care if it's YouTube, the song from Rocky, Casey and the Sunshine Band, a favorite, whatever it is that has that energy. And you're going to go in a very quiet place, put your headset on, and you're going to move. You're going to bring that energy up. You're going to change, not from walking to another room or going up a flight of stairs. You're going to physically move your state. Because the moment you push that blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, you've already changed the game. Because the prefrontal cortex is your center for creativity, decision-making, planning, and that initiation. When you put blood flow there, you've already turned down the amygdala deregulation, and you've opened up all the possibilities. But it goes from dramatic shift. And when I say dramatic, I mean I sing, I dance, I jump, I laugh. Those are exercises. And when I know I'm doing that, it means that in literally under a minute, I am physically in a different brain state. I've also released a cocktail, a neurochemical cocktail. I've released dopamine. I've released serotonin. I've released chemicals that the brain gives to me to power that software. But I was sitting on it like this. I also can use that same cocktail to calm myself down, to put on music that it's a lower resonance. We can typically see 60 to 80 beats as a we call it an alpha rhythm from music, and take the brain down to that stage. Why is that important? Because in that calm and relaxed stage, you're able to see possibilities that flow that you can't see when you're in full action mode. So the ability to have that shifting we talked about in adaptability comes from movement, both the dramatic and the other.
So you mentioned the 60 to 80 beats per minute. So I often go to fast moving music to ramp me up, particularly or speaking on stage or going into a meeting where I know I need to lead a team through a change. But I'm just curious about fast music versus the 60 to 80 beat per minute music.
So if you've been in a very anxious state that day, and by the way, anxiety is not a negative. Anxiety can motivate us to do challenges and stress, peak performance, etc. But when that anxiety has reached the point that has become for you a red flag, I'm stressed, I'm not eating, I got a dry mouth, I can't sleep, then you want to use the same movement to move towards what we call the alpha state, which is the calm state. When you want to move into high action, you do exactly what's there and you move immediately into high activity, not running a stair, put the music in and go. The science behind the ability to change state is not just high action, but it's the fastest way when you move into an energetic state. Amy Cuddy, who has done some phenomenal work out of Harvard, she taught people to use in moments of high anxiety, such as a job interview, the power pose. And her hypothesis in her research was, how we think, does that change biology, or does that biology change the state? And she discovered it's biology that changes the state. And through that, she taught people to take one of two poses, parallel studies. One sat at a desk, leaning back, waiting for an interview, not moving, etc., with negative expression. And the other did a quiet power pose, arms way above their head for 60 seconds, and held that pose, which is open, risk-free, non-defensive, receding, and to hold that power pose for 60 seconds.
Just a minute.
A minute. She said, share the science, because in independent studies, when they asked people to choose the people that were receptive, successful, energized, without exception, with no knowledge, they chose the power posers.
Mm.
You can do that as well if the music isn't available. And her research has been duplicated several times and is considered one of the seminal studies in the field. Mm. And also another one that, for people who know me, is actually kind of a secret weapon. Laughter. Now, people think that laughter is you need to have a joke to laugh. But babies laugh and they don't understand the meaning of a joke. They laugh because it's a cardiovascular system regulator. And if you can think and sit back and say, I can look around and just laugh, actually out loud laughing, you don't need a joke. Not only does it feel good because you're using all your neurobiology to do it, but it's also contagious.
Yeah.
Back to the co-regulation. So whenever I think something's really stuck and I'm looking at it from the wrong way, I start to laugh. I laugh at myself. I laugh at the situation. I laugh at what I'm doing. I say, well, look on the bright side, and I keep laughing. And within 2 minutes, I've released the cocktail.
Love that. Or if you want to, I'm guessing if you want a triple threat, you could have your hands in the air, you could laugh and listen to music at the same time.
Yeah, and if someone's around you and they laugh at you, it gets even funnier.
That is cool. I love that.
So
yeah.
So we mirror that energy, and the brain knows it. It doesn't need a course to do it. It just needs to move. Intention isn't enough. People say, well, I intend to. No, behavior makes the change. Behavior creates the capacity, and capacity creates the confidence. And the confidence, I can do that again.
Yes.
And every time we fire. Now, when people think, by the way, that this is woo-woo, that creating neurons, firing them, moving along is something you can't really see or measure. You and I had the experience, both of us, growing up in England at some point. And you, I believe, in London and me outside of London. And one of the most difficult things in the world is to find your way around London, because it is amazing.
Yes, that is true.
In England, they have done a study, and it has been followed by many people, to see how the British cabbies learn to do that entire GPS without a map.
Oh, the knowledge.
And to put the knowledge in their head.
Yeah.
And it's called the knowledge, and it takes 6 months of training and a very, very tough test. So they took the people into the knowledge course, assessed their brains, and 6 months later, those who were successful and graduated did the same thing with brain maps. And they had significantly changed, physically changed their brains to enlarge their hippocampus for memory and focus. And the people who did the knowledge physically are changed. Now, they weren't studying the executive skills. They were firing neurons to learn about a geography and to bring that forward. And that knowledge has been done with people who were not CEOs or vice presidents, but did the practice and got the result.
Yes. And to your point earlier, even if they don't get to the result, just by practicing in itself is still building the plasticity, the learning, and the ability to then think differently going forward.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Love that. So this is so much to unpack on this podcast as well, and lots that you've shared. And I'm just curious if through your career, which is extensive and amazing in terms of what you've achieved, if you had the opportunity to go back to your 20-year-old self, which is interesting because we're just hosting my 20-year-old niece. She came over from England to spend a year with us in Canada. So she's 20 and we're learning a lot from her. But if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
It's a great question. I will say that I used to think that success at the time, she would have believed that success was knowledge accumulation, performance of that, and to some extent status with respect to the titles or things that are regained.
Yes.
And looking back, I've learned that no one told me that the successful people, the most successful people, were not the people who had those things, but were successful in their ability to master themselves and their own neural pathways to achieve what they wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
If someone had given me that neural map, it would have been priceless. Perhaps some of the mistakes, some of the issues, things along the way, I would have seen them differently, even as opportunities. So I would give her that advice. Second thing I would say to her in looking at the things learned was the importance to celebrate. The brain loves watching us in action, but it's also important when it's achieved that we lock it down, cognitively record it, and celebrate it. In other words, we bring in dopamine hacks. Instead, what we typically do is we check it off the list, but we miss the dopamine hack. We miss the attaboy, attagirl, let's celebrate. And every one of those are opportunities to rewire you for the next success. It's right there. You just have to celebrate it.
Yes. Love that. It's a practice I've recently learned from someone is the 3 wins and then 3 things for tomorrow. So towards the end of the day, in the evening, a little bit before you're going to bed, just celebrate 3 things that went well today, which could be as simple as you saw the sunlight or you enjoyed a walk in the park, or it could be something more substantial like a deliverable or achieve something. And then, like you say, recognize that and then build on it. Say, okay, and how am I going to make tomorrow go really well? What 3 things are going to go well tomorrow? And you're preloading your brain to sleep on it to then encourage it to do even more tomorrow.
Not just encouraging it, because what you're doing with the encouragement is you're telling your brain, I like that pattern. The brain is based on patterns. So once you do that, and research has shown that by training people in companies to have 3 separate gratitudes every day for 21 days, change the behavior of the teams and individuals, because what happens is your brain now is looking for those 3 things. They have to be 3 new things. So the filter for your reticular activating system has changed. You're not looking for what problem do I fix today, for which many of us are rewarded. It's what else can I see? What haven't I seen? What am I missing? And rewarding yourself for finding that.
Yes. Yeah. Love that tip. And so for our listeners, someone who's wanting to make the shift but hasn't done that yet, given everything we've talked about, from the heart analogy to the neuropathways to the amygdala right at the beginning, what's the one thing you would want our audience to take away and start to make that shift?
It's always tough to think of one way, but I think a couple of things. I would sit back and say, what you want to understand is when you feel stuck, when you feel in that comfort zone you can't move out of, and that discomfort when you're thinking about doing something new, what's happening is it's your amygdala that's set at that thermostat point that's trying to keep you safe. So that discomfort is completely normal. Completely normal. So the next thing to do is to sit back and say, what are some behaviors, small, large, whatever, where you can take an immediate action? It could be a phone call you want to make, a conversation you've been looking for, one that has triggered for you some discomfort. And the moment you take that action, you have already reset that amygdala, downtrained it. You have already influenced your reticular activating system. And the moment you take that action, you've released dopamine. So you're training yourself not to pick up some brain tools, but to master the person who has the software. So something small, but take immediate action, not 3 to 5 years. Something small, something immediate, something you can see, and something you will know.
Love that. So a baby step, because then you start to build momentum.
Yes. And momentum is exactly the right word, John, because the momentum is contagious. And that momentum is like learning to dance. It's awkward the first steps. That's when you do a lot of laughter. It's not a rhythm because you haven't got a pattern. And it's tough to find partners because you're learning it on your own. But once you put that momentum together with practice, with the intention, because now you have the insight as to why you're doing it, and you behave it, and you release that dopamine, you're going to want to do it again.
Yes. And again and again, and then that builds
Again and
practice,
again.
and you advance and build more the momentum.
The momentum, exactly. And the result is your brain playbook has changed because you redesigned it from the inside out.
Awesome. So if our so much to cover, and if our audience listeners want to find out more, get in contact with you, where should they go?
They can phone me, or text me at 213-505-0808, or they can email me through my company at Coe at intellitalentinc.com, INTELLI talentinc.com.
Perfect. And I will put the details in the show notes as well for anyone who wants to reach out to you.
Thank you, John. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Karen. This has been awesome. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Yep, you too. Bye for now.
Bye.